Once and for all, does eating fat actually make you fat? Let's dive into the science and find out. Why is the idea that fat is bad seem to be ingrained in our brains? The low-fat concept started back in the 1950s and then exploded in the 1980s and 1990s with low-fat food marketing craze. Even celebrities jumped on the bandwagon. Who remembers Oprah wheeling out the wagon of fat on her show in 1988? Which, by the way, she says she regrets doing. In order to bust this myth, we need a little background on why this low-fat craze started in the first place. The idea that low-fat diets were better for our health started in the 1950s and the 1960s, when a few small studies suggested that saturated fat that we eat leads to higher cholesterol, which can clog arteries, which can lead to heart attacks, heart disease, and decrease our mortality rate. Based on this concept, there was a physiologist named Ancel Keys who hypothesized that eating saturated fat increased cholesterol levels, which increased your risk of cardiovascular disease, and then, of course, death. And he called this idea the diet heart hypothesis. Then, through an interesting political connection, Keys connected with an influential cardiologist whom he shared his diet heart hypothesis with. And then that cardiologist also happened to be the personal doctor for President Eisenhower. This connection led to the American Heart Association recommending that Americans reduce their saturated fat intake for their heart health. Then in 1980, the first dietary guidelines for Americans were created based on the concept that low fat is best. And in order to consume less fat, Americans should consume complex carbohydrates in the form of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. The problem here was that to most Americans, the message that rang clear was fat is bad, carbs are good. To this day, this message is still around. As researcher David Ludwig says, the low-fat diet remains deeply embedded in public consciousness and food policy. For the food industry, this became an opportunity to create and market foods specifically for this low-fat craze. Everywhere on shelves were no-fat yogurts, cookies, crackers, salad dressings, pretzels, the list continues. And who remembers those no-fat Snackwell cookies from the 1990s? I definitely do. The problem is that the fat was removed and then these clever marketing companies added in other ingredients that aren't so good for us. What coincided with this low-fat craze that we didn't know at the time was the onset of the obesity epidemic in the United States. So if cutting back on fat was supposed to be good for our heart and health, where did we go wrong? Our bodies actually need some fat, and fat is key in maintaining our health, and here's why. Fat are key in cell membranes, they help us transport proteins throughout our blood, and they help us absorb certain vitamins. Vitamins A, D, E, and K, and carotenoids, a type of antioxidant, all require fat for our body to absorb them. Plus, fat helps with insulation, regulating our body temperature, hormones. It's a really important part of our health. There are also two essential fats which you may have heard, omega-3s and omega-6s. And they're essential because our body cannot make them, so we have to consume them through our food. And these essential fats help us maintain healthy skin, healthy nerves, and our cell membranes. The balance of omega-3s to omega-6s is also super important, and if you're interested in learning more about that, drop me a comment below and we'll make a new video on that. Or for more on omega-3s, I discuss omega-3s and how they can help fight inflammation in another video, which you can find right here. And if we don't eat enough omega-3s, that can affect the functioning of our brain and our nervous system. Now we know why fats are pretty freaking important. Knowing that fats are important for our health is only part of the equation. The type of fat we consume is also key. Unsaturated fats are thought to be the good fat, whereas saturated fats are considered the bad fat and the ones that have been shown to raise cholesterol levels. For now, we're going to focus on the good fats, but keep watching for more research-backed information on those saturated fats. Unsaturated fats come in two types: monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. Monounsaturated fats are found in things like avocado, olive and peanut oil, seeds like pumpkin and sesame, and polyunsaturated fats are found in walnuts, fish, soybean oil, canola oil, and sunflower oil. Research shows that replacing saturated fats in our diet with unsaturated fats and high-quality carbohydrates can reduce our risk of coronary artery disease. But hang on, there's another train of thought that keeps popping up. It's those pesky processed carbs. Back to researcher David Ludwig, who sees processed carbs as more of a problem than saturated fats. He even told Women's Health, when you consider white bread and butter, white bread is the less healthful component in that equation. In fact, the same research that said replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fat and high-quality carbohydrates was good for our health also showed that when you replace saturated fat with really refined carbohydrates, like refined starches and added sugars, it's positively associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease. Not great. When you hear saturated fat, what do you think of? I'm guessing meat, eggs, butter, coconut oil, and if so, those are all correct. In general, saturated fat is one that is solid at room temperature and tends to hold its shape. They're called saturated because of their structure. All of the carbon bonds are attached with hydrogen bonds and thus saturated with hydrogen, and that's how they got their name, saturated fats. Studies in the 1970s included one large research study that was not randomized, a big red flag in research, showed that saturated fat consumption increased cholesterol levels. From there, a strong correlation between saturated fat, high cholesterol, and cardiovascular disease and mortality was made. Back to that diet heart hypothesis. However, with so many red flags in this research, these theories have been retested. A study from 2015 found no clear association between higher intake of saturated fats and all-cause mortality. It did find that when saturated fat replaces carbohydrate in the diet, LDL and total cholesterol increased. And replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats reduced coronary risk by 13%. A more recent review done in 2020 by the Cochrane Group sought to find out how cutting back on saturated fats in the diet could affect one's health. The results showed that cutting back on saturated fat led to a 21% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular disease, but it had little effect on the risk of dying. Now, this is not telling us that we should cook everything in butter because it's going to have little effect on the risk of dying. Remember the research from earlier? Health benefits arose when we replaced saturated fat with unsaturated fat and high-quality carbohydrates. When the low-fat craze hit, companies sought to make products to appeal to the low-fat, more-carb message. And by removing fat from their products, they still had to make it taste good, so they would oftentimes add sugar or salt to the product. For instance, let's take a look at reduced fat Oreos compared to regular Oreos. Let's look at the nutrition label for reduced fat Oreos. 3 cookies are a serving and they have 150 calories, 4.5 grams of fat, 14 grams of sugar, and 27 grams of carbohydrate. Regular Oreos are 160 calorie, so only 10 calories more. They have 7 grams of fat, 14 grams of sugar, and 25 grams of carbohydrates. So almost the same amount of calories. How is this possible when you reduce the fat by 2.5 grams, which equals 22.5 calories? Let's check out the ingredients because they clearly reduce the fat and increase the carbohydrates. For the reduced fat cookies, they added glycerin, a sugar alcohol, which helps preserve moisture and add smoothness to the cookie. This is almost like a sleight of hand trick by these food marketing companies. They lure you in with the reduced fat label and marketing, when in reality, the reduced fat version isn't any healthier than the regular version of Oreos. So, does eating fat make you fat? No. Eating fat does not automatically add fat to your body. Fat metabolism is much more complicated than that. Now, fat is calorie dense with 9 calories per gram, but as we've outlined in the rest of the video, not all fats are created equal. Eating an avocado provides healthy fat, vitamins, minerals, fiber, and those wonderful omega-3s. Contrast that to eating a saturated fat, like having some butter on your toast instead of avocado. While it's tasty, and it does have some trace vitamins and minerals, and doesn't have the loads of health benefits that those unsaturated fats do. Which brings us back to carbs. Cutting out fat and replacing it with processed carbohydrates in the form of ultra-processed foods is hypothesized to be a contributing factor to the obesity epidemic in the United States. That less fat, more carb idea really needed to be more clear. Turns out fat is not bad. It's actually good for you. Avoid the low-fat, no-fat marketing on prepackaged snacks because it's likely a sugar, salt, or carbohydrate trap. Fat is essential for vitamin absorption, our cells, our brain, and so much more. And research shows that unsaturated fats have loads of health benefits. And just know that trans fats are unanimously terrible. So add those avocados, olive oil, nuts, and fatty fish to nourish your body. As always, thank you so much for watching and following along to bust this myth on fats. Tap that like button below and hit subscribe so you can follow along and join in to be notified when we release new videos on more nutrition tips like this one and healthy recipes. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, eat well, be well, thrive.